Sometime in the last couple days, you received an email from me inviting you to join our ArcGIS Online account. You probably got an indication that you'd be receiving a separate message. I thought you would be, actually, from ESRI, the Environmental Sciences Research Institute, with instructions for how to do this. But anyway, you've got a single message telling you how to create an account at arcgis.com. Once you create that account, you'll end up at this page. Now, I didn't really give you any instructions yet, but this week, once we finish up our first day of field work and have some observations to play around with, I'm going to have you work with our data, the point locations of the control points that we worked with in the lab, to learn a thing or two about how spatial data work and then how we can create a map out of them in a mapping program. I'm not going to give you a lot of instruction, but I'm going to give you a quick tour of ArcGIS Online, give you enough of a background that you can start to noodle with the tools a little bit and complete the homework assignment. Now, just to be clear, I'm not expecting anything of cartographic excellence. We've taught you nothing about map making yet, but I want you to use your intuition and present the points however you see fit by creating a map in ArcGIS Online. Now, the interface itself, you'll notice that once you first log in, you can see, and if you have any trouble logging in, reach out to me. But once you are able to log in, you will see that over on the right-hand side, you can access your account. And I just want to point out that by clicking on My Settings and then Licenses, you can download your own copy of ArcGIS Pro. If you click on this link, you'll see that there are actually instructions for doing this. They're pretty easy to follow, and then once you have an account, once it's installed, you just turn the program on and authenticate using your account, and you're off and running. The problem with this is it's only available for people with the Windows operating system. So if you have a Mac, you have to have a sector with Windows loaded on it, or partition with Windows loaded on it to operate the program. If you'd like to talk about installing Arc, I recommend it. It's not required, but it does mean that you can access the software off campus on your own time, which I find really helpful. Now, once you have yourself up and running, whether or not you download your own copy of Arc, the basic orientation to this page is there are several things you probably want to take a look at. First off, we have a group. I'm not certain yet how we'll use this, but I have created a group for our class this spring. I may use this to deploy data and various files if it seems like it would be useful. You'll also notice that you yourself have a content page. In my case, I have two items here. One is a file that I uploaded. This is available, by the way, under the Unit 1 tab at Blackboard. You'll see a file called Data Lab 1 Points, and here it is. I uploaded this thing called a shapefile, and it turned it into something we can work with in ArcOnline, and this is available to you. If you want to create your own file, you can go to your content page and say New Item, and here you can drag that file from our page. It's right here, Data. If you download this, you can then drag and drop that file here, and Arc will know what to do with it. It will turn it into a file called Lab 1 Points. Now, whether you get it from the available content from ArcOnline or you create it yourself in your own content page, the way to access this is to open up a new map. So here I've got a generic look at the generic or default view in ArcMap, and what I'm going to do is add a layer. So I'm going to click on Layers and say Add Layer here, and in my content collection I have these points. If you create one yourself, you can access it by dragging and dropping that file. You can access it from this location, or if you click on Content and go to My Organization, you'll see that the most recent file created for our organization, UMBC, was these Lab 1 Points. Wherever you get it from, when you click plus, those points will get loaded. Now, these are the 8 points that we worked with in Wednesday's lab. Friday's lab may be a little different depending on weather conditions. But here what I'm going to show you applies to any lab. Now, I'm producing this video on Thursday afternoon. If you're in the Friday lab, you may end up working with a different set of control points depending on the weather. I'm setting up a slightly indoor version of this. Collectively, these things are called a shape file. The file that I uploaded for you, the zipped file, contained multiple elements. And we're going to talk more about the structure of this file, but the way to think about it is this file contains two different things. It contains information for pinpointing those locations, so it has coordinates, latitudes and longitudes for those 2 points. That's about it. Now, the way GIS works is we combine that spatial data, the information about location, so latitudes and longitudes for points. The other type of data that we have in a shapefile is called attribute data. And that's a little bit more familiar, probably. It looks like a data table. So within this layer, if I want to look at the attributes of the file, I will say show table. Every shapefile, you'll see, has a built-in attribute table. Looks like this. And so for our file, I'll make this a little bit bigger, you can see there are 8 different locations. I've got a label for each one, so point 1, point 2, and so forth. And then in here I've included the latitude and longitude. X is the longitude, how far east and west is something. Think about a Cartesian coordinate system. X is measuring how far left and right, so that's analogous to longitude. And then Y is measuring how far north and south, how far up and down. So everything you can see is roughly 39 degrees north of the equator and about 77 degrees west of the prime meridian, right here on campus. Now, just for fun, if you scroll to the right in this table, you'll see I've also included a little bit more information. I've included these coordinates in a different coordinate system called state plane. And I've included these coordinates in a different datum called the North American Datum of 1983. You'll see these coordinates look a whole lot like the first set of coordinates. And guess what we're going to talk about next week? We're going to start talking about how we georeference things, what these coordinate systems are, and how come they're different. So we'll start talking about those wirehead aspects of spatial data in our lab next week. Each lab will culminate in some sort of representation of your work, and so at the end of the day what you've done is you've visited these points. Now I want you to play in ArcGIS Online. When you have a file open, you'll notice that you can manipulate its symbology. So you can change what it looks like from a red dot to something else by looking at the style options. So I can change a lot of things about this point. I can change it from a point to a plus sign, sort of like I had on the maps that you saw. I can change the color by selecting the outline and say making it a red outline. And I can change the size, here, I can manipulate that. And when I'm done, I can say done. And you can see I've got these red points. They don't look that great, so I might want to go back and darken them a little bit or perhaps make them larger. I can also label the points, kind of like they were labeled on our map. And I've actually returned to this to show you how to label points. I lost the symbology, so I'd have to repeat that step. Of course, repeating things makes it easier to do them the next time. There's no better teacher than practice. To label points, I'm going to click on this ellipsis on the right-hand side here, and I'll say labels. And then the only feature I have open here is these labels, but if I had multiple features, I'd have to make sure that I'm labeling the thing I want to label. And here I just need to say enable labels, and then I can pick the field that is being used. In this case, I'm going to make it be label. And when I say replace, then I should see 1, 2, 3, 4, the same point numbers that we saw in the lab. Now, if I want to modify the label style, of course, I can click on Modify Style. And when I'm done, exit, I can change the font color, those sorts of things, by modifying the style within the Label Features option. The other thing I can do is provide some context. So in this case, I've got a legend down here at the bottom telling me that each of these red plus signs is a point, and I can add additional information to make this easier to see. So for example, right now behind these points, I'm looking at what's called a base map. There's already a map there for us. I can change that here. So right now we have this stock base map. I can change it to a different type of base map, like terrain with labels. And if I click on this living atlas, I can find a whole bunch more base maps. So here I can find, for example, aerial imagery and use that as the base map. When you explore these different base map types, you'll see that you have options. I can also, because that base map's pretty dark, even if I re-symbolize those red plus signs and make them a little bit more bright, I might want to tone this down a little bit just by tweaking the transparency. And I can do that here and make the base map a little bit more faint so that I can see my points better. So in other words, if you explore the properties here of any feature that you're looking at, either the base map or the single layer that you're working with, you can learn how to play around with the symbology, how things appear. And another way to think about that is how you are representing these real-world features in a presentation, in a document, to show what you've done. If I want, for example, to add a legend, I can click on the More option and then select Legend. That kind of disappeared there. I actually was turning it off. If I don't have Legend on and click on it, then it will turn on. Now the legend is giving me a list of the features on the map so that I can share that with the reader to make it slightly more legible. Just like anything else, any other computer program, you definitely want to make sure to save your changes. So by clicking on Save and Open, I can save my map. And here I'm just going to call it Test. I would recommend calling yours something a little bit more illustrative, like Campus Lab 1 control points or something to that effect. Something that explains what your map is conveying. There are a few other features here that are pretty easy to encounter, and if you explore some of these options on the right-hand side, you'll see that when you have a layer open, like in this case, our points, you get these different options available to you on the right-hand side, among them some analytical tools that are kind of helpful, like I showed you how to label. I can also access these other tools that are allow me to do things like measure. So for example, I can see how far it is from point 1 to point 2, and you can check that against the measurements that you created when you were estimating it in the lab. So you can check your reckoning of things. Now the basic idea here is I want to show you and get you used to playing around with or working with, depends on how you view it, spatial data. We're going to get a lot of practice with this semester, and next week we're going to start working with ArcGIS on the computer, not online. It's a slightly more elaborate, more powerful program. But for now, I'm going to have you explore options that will be available in ArcGIS Pro when we start using it, and just get yourself wrapped around the idea that we're looking at objects on a map, and at the same time those objects have attributes that occur in a table, and those two things interact with each other. I have control over how things appear, and so the one thing I want you to focus on in this homework assignment is make a map of those points however you want to. It's not intended for you to be a cartography expert. More to the point, what we're going to attempt to do is take your maps and say, here's what works, here's what we can improve on. So get some ideas for how to improve our cartographic skills bit by bit throughout the semester. So in homework 1, you will be providing a map that you generate here. You can take a screenshot of that map and paste it into a file in which you include also your table, the data entry table that you generated when you were exploring the control points in the orienteering exercise. And then you're going to answer a few questions. Altogether, this document may be a couple pages long with the graphics. Your answers don't have to be exhaustive, but I do want you to think a little bit and a little bit critically about what you're seeing and doing. And that, in a nutshell, is how you will complete the first homework assignment due next Tuesday, the 8th of February.